You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a historical, chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss cases from each year starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
And sorry, this week could sound a little different to you guys.
Yeah, a little bit.
We're trying out Zoom recording. So
Weird.
We'll see how this goes. So either way, it doesn't sound bad to me on my end, but to be determined, TBD. So we are actually to episode 67.
Look at us.
I can't believe it.
We are senior citizens.
I also cannot promise that I will not make jokes 2 episodes from now.
Oh, no.
You know me.
I do.
It's me. So it is what it is. But we actually top news this week, which is actually funny because this person may not be expecting it because they just did this, but we're recording super late this week.
Yeah, we are.
This episode's supposed to be out in a casual 5 hours. So we have a new patron this week to shout out.
Drum roll.
Justin W. I'll just say that. We have a first and last name, but I'm not going to say the whole thing just in case. So,
because you know who you are.
You know who you are. And thank you so much for becoming a patron. And I mean, might as well just go ahead and plug it here. You too can become a patron by going to onenationundercrime.com. And you can find the Patreon little link there. Or if you just want to be real fancy, you can go to patreon.com/onenationundercrime. There are tiers of becoming a patron. So you can decide. They have fun names. You can decide what tier you want to be in. And there are fun little things that you can get. There are bonus episodes. You get something in the mail from us. There's also wallpapers and backgrounds. So if you really want our logo as your phone background, I have phone backgrounds on there too. So fun times had all around. So thank you.
You get our undying love and devotion.
It is true. It's true. You have it. Yes.
But it's for real.
It's solidified.
Exactly.
So, there is that. So thank you, Justin W., for becoming another ONUC patron. We greatly appreciate it. And you will be getting something soon from us in the mail. So we are going to go ahead and go into our case for this week, and I'll go ahead and hit our sources. So one of them, as usual, is a book that was, like I said last week, where I was like, it was enjoyable, ? Just because it was the way it's written, it's not court transcripts.
By the neck until dead?
No, it's actually called Market Street, the most historic highway in America. It's Merchants and Its Story by Joseph Jackson.
Oh.
And then, of course, the ever formidable
Murder by Gaslight.
There you go. Now you're catching on.
I've learned some things.
I mean, it's episode 67, I would hope by this point, but
I still can't figure out how much money is the conversion. No. It's numbers. It's numbers. Math makes me cry.
I think that's what it was made for. So we'll get into our births for this week. And our births in 1853, the first one up, January 2nd. This first name, so we've talked about it. There are some names that you can only have a specific job, or you have to do something cool with your name.
Oh dear.
Packy Dillon.
Oh my.
Was born on January 2nd. And when I tell you what Packy Dillon did, you'll go, yep, that sounds about right. He was a professional catcher who played for the 1875 St. Louis Red Stockings. This was before they were the Cardinals. So he was a catcher in baseball. So with a name like Packy Dillon,
I mean, yeah, there
That's
you
something.
go.
I mean, let me tell you, if any other baseball players of my favorites that would like to listen, like please do. They know, well, they should know who they are. They're all Atlanta Braves, but you know, just saying, if any of them would like to say hello, Will Smith, yes, that's his actual name. Will Smith is one of them. We have Dansby Swanson. Love Dansby Swanson. One of my favorites as well. He actually looks like a country music singer, and every time that I see him, I get both of them mixed up. He looks like Thomas Rhett, like surprisingly like Thomas Rhett. Ozzy Albies, love Ozzy Albies. His smile could make peace among the nations. But anyways, it's that's just where I am. So Packy Dillon was a Capricorn, and also Dansby Swanson, you also had to be a baseball player. Like there's no
I mean, that's a fun name.
Freddie Freeman, even though he left the Braves, he still has a place in my heart somewhere.
And you're not bitter.
I'm not bitter, but he was there for the World Series, but still, there is that. People are learning about the facets of me now. They're like, you kind of sound like a witch on some days, but you really are into baseball. Yes.
She's well-rounded, people. It's all about
balance. It's got to, the yin and the yang of the world.
That's it.
The Martha and the Snoop. You got to have both sides. Y'all know.
Exactly right. That's why we get along so well.
It is. Leah's birthday was just this past week, and the gift that I sent her was Snoop Dogg. So
yes, it was. And it made me laugh in the office.
Of course. January 17th, Alva Belmont. That's a name.
That is.
She was a multi-millionaire socialite and a women's suffrage activist.
Sounds like a socialite name.
Yeah, Ava Belmont. Yeah, Alva. Yeah, Alva. Yes. I keep wanting to say Ava, but Alva. She was noted for her energy, intelligence, strong opinions, and her willingness to challenge social convention.
Wait a minute. Did they say Kayla? What's her name?
Oh, it was Alva. 2 A's, so close.
It just sounded like you.
But close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So that's where we're at. She was a Capricorn. On February 3rd, we have Hudson Maxim. These names this week, let me tell you.
I know. I like them.
Hudson was an inventor and chemist who invented a variety of explosives, including smokeless gunpowder.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Thomas Edison referred to him as, quote, the most versatile man in America. That's pretty great. Thomas Edison is saying, like,
I mean, getting accolades from him.
I mean, any at all. He was an Aquarius. April 8th, we have Laura Alberta Linton.
Oh my.
She was a chemist and physician, and she was a member of both the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Association for the Advancement of Women.
You go, girl.
She sounds pretty great. And I love her name, Laura Linton. That's some really good alliteration.
Yes, it is.
Books should be written about her, honestly. The name and what she did as well. But, she was an Aries. May 8th, we have Catherine Lynch Stevenson. She was a temperance reformer, missionary, and editor. She was a successful platform speaker, writer, and officer of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, on whose behalf she visited Japan, China, India, and Australia.
Wow.
As a missionary, which at that time is like, so this is when she was born. So even if you think about it, like maybe she was 20. So 1873, like that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
She was a Taurus, which I feel like is fitting. Because Taurus's sign is like a bull. So I feel like that's a little fitting. She seems as though she's probably a pretty tough woman. July 24th, we have William Hooker Gillette. He was an actor, manager, playwright, and stage manager in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He is remembered for portraying Sherlock Holmes on stage and in a 1916 silent film thought to be lost until it was rediscovered in 2014.
Oh, cool.
I know, pretty crazy. And he's a Leo.
I was going to ask if he invented the razor when you said his name.
I know. When I saw it too, that's why I clicked on his name.
Or like a certain blade.
Yeah, I was like, interesting. So no, but he's a Leo. July 27th, we have Elizabeth Ann Plankinton, not Plankton, Plankinton. She was a philanthropist in the early 20th century, and she's the daughter of Milwaukee businessman John Plankinton. She was also known as Miss Lizzie, and the people of Milwaukee called her the municipal patroness because of her generosity. She made a large donation that actually built the first YWCA in Milwaukee. She's a Leo. November 9th, we have Stanford White. He's an architect and a painter in the architectural firm McKim, Mead and White. It's one of the most significant firms for architecture. He designed many houses for the rich in addition to numerous civic, institutional, and religious buildings. His temporary Washington Square Arch was so popular that he was commissioned to design a permanent one. His design principles embodied the American Renaissance period. So the Washington Square Arch, like if you're thinking, oh, could it be the famous arch in New York City? Yes. So the big famous arch that you always see like in photos in New York City, he created that.
That's him.
He did a temporary one and then they wanted a permanent one.
Well, cool.
So he's a Scorpio. And then on to our deaths in 1853. It's a sad day. March 30th. While her name does not live up to the amazing double L of her husband, Abigail Fillmore.
I knew it was going to be Fillmore.
I know. First and second lady of the United States and wife of our favorite Millard Fillmore. Not really just because of his politics, simply because of the name.
It's just going to say Millard Fillmore.
It's a good name. And now anybody who's listening to this podcast, like you will know he was president at one point. Like that's all like, yeah, we've done that. So October 27th, Maria White Lowell died. She was a poet and abolitionist. Her poems were actually privately printed by her husband 2 years after her death. Her husband was also a poet named James Russell Lowell. So yeah, this was kind of still a time when like women, we talked about some before where like women really just didn't have like things printed because of their, they were women, which garbage, but
because they were women.
Yeah, because they were women. And so 2 years after her death, he privately printed all of them for her. So, I mean, nice. I wish could have happened when she was alive, but still, at least, I like to personally think that the wonderful Maria haunted him for 2 years before he posted them, like went and he was like, fine, I'll print them. And then that's when he it took 2 years for him to sleep peacefully at night because she was just standing over him like, excuse me. Hello.
Maybe it just took him that long to get them all put together how he wanted them.
Maybe. I'm not going with that though. But anyways.
Of course you're not.
December 28th, Sarah Goodrich died. She was a miniature painter for like little miniature photos. It was really cute.
She wasn't miniature. She just painted miniatures.
Correct.
I mean, it could go either way.
It could. I agree. And then as we discuss our people of interest for each year now, our person of interest for 1853 is Bartholomew William Barclay Masterson, aka Bat Masterson. And this is one of those people that probably like the name Bat Masterson probably sounds a little familiar. Like you don't know where you've heard it, but you're like, I've heard it somewhere. But before we figure out why you might know the name, we're going to talk about the person. So Bat Masterson was born on November 26th of 1853, making him a Sagittarius. And he was born in Henryville, Quebec, which is what was then known as East Canada. And or actually Canada East. I know that he was born in Canada, but
this happened in the United States.
Yes, he grew up in the United States like from a young age, and he lived all of his life in the United States. So making him like a pretty notable name in the United States as far as that goes. He was the second of 6 children. Too many? Yes.
That's a lot of children.
And they were all raised on farms in Quebec, New York, Illinois, and Missouri until the family finally settled down in Wichita, Kansas.
All right.
He left home at 19 with his brother Ed, and Ed will come back, where they became buffalo hunters and Indian scouts in Dodge City. In August of 1874, Masterson signed on as a U.S. Army scout with Colonel Nelson Miles, who was leading a force from Fort Dodge to pursue Comanche and Apache war parties across the Cherokee Strip and into Texas. Masterson's first gunfight took place on January 24th of 1876 in Sweetwater, Texas.
I think I know where I know the name, but I'll keep him quiet.
Yep. He was attacked by a soldier named Corporal Melvin King, allegedly, because he was with a woman named Molly Brennan. Molly was hit by one of King's bullets. So Bat Masterson was seen with Molly Brennan. And supposedly, Corporal King was dating Molly. And so a scrimmage ensued. And so Molly was actually hit by one of King's bullets, possibly by accident, although some say maybe not. And she was actually killed.
Oh, no.
And then King, like Colonel King, died of his wounds that he received from Bat Masterson. Masterson was actually shot in the pelvis, but he recovered completely. And this is the reason why he used a cane, which would become one of his famous trademarks throughout his life. So on June 6th of 1877, Masterson tried to prevent the arrest of Robert Gilmore, known by the locals as Bobby Gill. Now, stick with me with the names here and how this all connects, because once I figured out in my head how it worked, it's possibly one of the funniest things that I've ever heard.
Oh my.
So Masterson tried to prevent the arrest of a man that the locals knew as Bobby Gill. Masterson managed to wrap his arms around the 315-pound city marshal, Larry Degger, which allowed Bobby Gill to escape. Well, Masterson was grabbed by friends of the city marshal and he was pistol whipped. The following day, Masterson was fined $25 for disturbing the peace. Bobby Gill, who he helped run away, which was the cause of his fine, Bobby Gill was only fined $5.
Oh.
But it gets better. The month after, Masterson was hired to serve under the sheriff, who was Sheriff Charles Bassett. So Bassett had been a sheriff for so long that he was prohibited by the Kansas state constitution to seek a third consecutive term. They're like, you've already done 2. We can't let you do another. So Masterson decided, all right, fine. I've been serving under him for a while. I'll just run. We'll just be done that way.
Well, there you go.
Masterson's opponent turned out to be U.S. Marshal Larry Degger.
Oh, my.
On November 6th of 1877, Masterson was elected county sheriff to Ford County, Kansas by a narrow margin of 3 votes.
Wow. You don't see that happen anymore.
No, but are you ready for where like it gets even funnier?
Oh, no.
Within a month of Masterson's election, so there's now going to be 2 Mastersons. There's Bat and there's Ed. I told you to remember about Ed before.
Yes.
So on December 6th of 1877, Ed Masterson replaced U.S. Marshal Larry Duggar as the city marshal of Dodge City. So together, the Masterson brothers controlled the city and county police forces.
I mean, gotta do what you gotta do.
I can't. It's so funny. Well, on February 1st of 1878, Sheriff Masterson captured the notorious outlaws David Rudabaugh and Ed West, who were wanted for an attempted train robbery. Two more of the train robbers were caught by Bat and his brother Ed on March 15th. The two law enforcement men made an effort to nope. I don't know what that was. The tandem law enforcement effort came up to an abrupt end, however, when 25-year-old Marshal Ed Masterson was shot and killed in the line of duty. So Bat's brother. Ed Masterson was mortally wounded by a cowboy named Jack Wagner, who a lot of people might know that name as well. Well, Jack Wagner was unaware that Bat Masterson was in the vicinity. As Ed stumbled away from the scene, Bat responded from across the street, firing on both Wagner and Wagner's boss, who was Alf Walker, who was holding a gun. Well,
wait, his name was Alf?
Alf Walker, yeah.
He was an alien.
Well, Jack Wagner died the next day, but Walker was taken back to Texas, Texas, and recovered. Masterson took place in several notable gunfights and became synonymous with some pretty famous names that include Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, my friend. By the mid-1880s, Masterson had moved to Denver, Colorado, and established himself as a pretty good gambler. He took an interest in prize fighting and became a leading authority on the sport, and he attended almost every important match and title fight in the United States from the 1880s until his death in 1921.
Wow, that is quite a hobby.
I know. He moved to New York City in 1902 and spent the rest of his life as a reporter and columnist for the Morning Telegraph. His column covered boxing and other sports, and it frequently gave his opinions on crime, war, politics, and other topics. He actually became close friends with President Theodore Roosevelt and was one of they called them the White House gunfighters. And they actually received federal appointments from President Roosevelt at the time. Well, on October 25th of 1921, at age 67, Bat Masterson died at his desk from a massive heart attack after writing what became his final column for the Morning Telegraph. 11 years after Masterson's death, a collection of short stories by Damon Runyon was published under the title Guys and Dolls. These stories later formed the basis for the classic 1950 musical comedy by the same name.
I was going to say, isn't that a musical?
Yep. The central character in Runyon's Guys and Dolls was a high-rolling gambler from Colorado who Runyon barely disguised by the name because the guy's name was Sky Masterson in the musical. During Bat Masterson's eulogy, because like I said, Runyon was his friend who wrote the story Guys and Dolls. Runyon said, quote, he was a 100% 22-carat real man. Bat was a good hater and a wonderful friend. He was always stretching out his hand to some down and outer. He had a great sense of humor and a marvelous fund of reminiscence, and was one of those most entertaining companions we have ever known. There are only few men in the world like Bat Masterson, and his death is a genuine loss. Which, that's one of the sweetest things somebody can say about you. I
would love for someone to say something like that about me.
I know. I'll say it in your eulogy. I'll say it quote for quote, and they're going to be like, her name was Leah. It's not that. Everybody's going to be like, don't challenge her. Don't challenge her.
Right.
She's fine.
Listen to the podcast, episode number 67.
I know, exactly. Masterson was known throughout the country as a leading sports writer and celebrity. He is remembered today for his connection to many of the Wild West's most iconic people, places, and events, and his life and likeness are frequently depicted in pop culture today.
Mm-hmm.
So is that how you know him?
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, oh, he was during the time of the Wild West. When you said Dodge City, I was like, okay.
Oh yeah, Dodge City is all you really have to
yeah.
say.
I was like, okay, he was in the Wild West with all the, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and all of that.
Well, and I'm pretty sure in high school, probably for one of my classes, we had to watch like Guys and Dolls, or we had to read it or something as like something to review for theater. But I remember it like vaguely, but I never knew that it was after him. And not only that, but the guy that wrote it was one of his best friends and spoke at his funeral. So it was always just really fun because Guys and Dolls, like that still comes around. Like that's still done on Broadway.
That's one that I haven't seen though. I
haven't either. But it's kind of like My Fair Lady, or like a few of those that kind of like The Music Man, that every few like it goes off Broadway for a while, but then there's like another revival of it that kind of comes back around. I feel like Guys and Dolls is one of those that does that too. To where it's kind of always out there. Like I know Phantom. Well,
both of us Phantom.
Well, but it's continuous, so it doesn't ever go off Broadway. It's kind of like how Wicked and Hamilton are. Like they haven't gone off Broadway since they were there. Mm-hmm. But I think like they kind of hop back and forth between different ones. But so on to our case for this week. March 11th of 1853, the bodies of Honora Shaw and Ellen Lynch were found brutally murdered in the front parlor of their home on Federal Street in Philadelphia. The question remained, though, was it their frequent friend, Arthur Spring, or his son, Arthur Spring Jr.?
Arthur Spring did it.
Yeah, exactly. While the scene of our murder this week takes place on Federal Street, there is also a connection to Market Street. And I did say that was one of our sources, was talking about Market Street. And if anyone from Philadelphia is listening, then they know that Market Street has a pretty historic past all its own. So since we've already covered Philadelphia as a whole, we're going to talk about Market Street in particular. It was originally known as High Street and was the familiar focal point of the founding of Philadelphia. Philadelphia's founder, William Penn, planned for markets to be regularly held on the 100-foot wide street. It's a pretty wide street. The first market stalls began at Front Street and followed all the way down to 8th. And they were situated kind of like right in the middle. And they were supposed to eventually be taken down. But instead, they just covered them and made them like a permanent fixture on High Street. It was around 1800 when it gained the name Market Street for obvious reasons, because it was just like an open market that people went up and down. The name became official in 1858, which interestingly enough was the year before the market sheds were ordered to be removed. So,
Okay.
Yeah. As I said before, Market Street is a pretty historic area, and for good reason. For instance, Benjamin Franklin's home was located near the intersection of 4th and Market, and a lot of his experiments were carried out along Market Street, including his famous kite flying experiment, which likely occurred near 3rd and Market Street.
Cool.
The Graff House, or the Declaration House, is at the 7th Street intersection and is the boarding house where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. The financier of the American Revolution, no big deal, Robert Morris, just that guy.
Yeah.
Had his mansion located near the intersection of 6th Street. This house was later called the President's Mansion and was used by George Washington and John Adams as their residences during their terms as president. Because remember, it went from New York to Philadelphia and then from Philadelphia to DC as like the capital. So they were in Philadelphia and they lived in this house while they were there on Market Street. So
very cool.
The amount of
much history there. I need to go.
So I know. I was thinking about that as I was writing this earlier. But yes, the amount of landmarks on this street is honestly like astounding. And they include Independence National Historic Park, which, is just home to the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, the National Constitution Center, and of course, and most importantly, filming location of National Treasure.
I was going to say something about that. It was coming.
Such a good movie. You'll never convince me otherwise. It's so good.
Segue from the Abigail that was in it.
Yes.
She is in a movie called The 355. It's like a group of women spies. Pretty good. You need to watch it.
I could see that. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Pretty
I could see her in that.
And she's German. So continue.
Interesting. I could probably see that though, honestly.
Yeah.
But yes. So filming location of Market Street. National Treasure. Remember when Abigail's hiding from the guy? I wonder if that's Market Street.
Well, probably
there's the market because she's in the market and she like jumps behind the counter.
Yeah, well, and that's where they are. They're going.
Yeah, that's right where they are.
You talked about that's where they are.
Interesting. So that's what I'm saying. Filming location of National Treasure.
We need to go.
Yes. Also Boston and Salem. Because
do it.
Me. Then there is Penn's Landing on the Delaware River, which commemorates William Penn landing in the area, though it's not the actual location that he landed. That's actually in Chester, Pennsylvania. But, then we have the National Museum of American Jewish History, the Fashion District, and the Reading Terminal. And I remember saying this railroad name because I would get tongue-tied. We talked about it earlier. The Reading Terminal was the former grand station for the Reading Railroad, not the Reading Rainbow. So
Reading Rainbow.
I mean, anyways.
Such a good show.
The more
Don't take my word for it.
Yeah. And Philadelphia City Hall is also there as well. The Avenue of Technology is from the intersections of 34th and 28th Streets. It is home to many technology-related institutions, and it is marked on the street with turquoise and black light post banners. Cool. This area is also well known for lovers of the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia because the neon signs of Market Street and Penn's Landing are in the opening titles of the show. And also
that I've watched.
No, me neither, but also National Treasure.
Yes.
The gif of Charlie Day that I've sent you a bunch where there's the strings all over the wall and he's pointing at it like a crazy person. That's from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So in Market Street, Philadelphia, the most historic highway in America, they opened the section regarding this case by saying, quote, "On Market Street, east of Juniper, stood a little confectionery which boasted of a talkative parrot that would talk for the children coming in with their pennies for candy if they made a purchase."
That's fun.
The little confectionery, however, did not get a place in history from this circumstance, but from a far more tragic one. For an employee of the candy store was Arthur Spring, who committed one of the most shocking murders which had startled the community up to that time. I can't speak today, apparently. Yes, Arthur Spring worked in this shop, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. I actually don't think I included it in here, but around the same time in the same year that was in this article, there was another man who was actually the owner of a toy shop. And he was murdered like behind the counter of the toy store. And I remember it was a case that I almost covered, but there wasn't enough information to cover it. And I didn't know like kind of what happened. Like I knew the person's name and I knew it was in Philadelphia and he owned a toy shop and that was it. And then I kind of saw it roped in with this case. Well, later on, they actually think that Arthur Spring committed that murder too.
Oh, no.
So it was just very weird that was kind of included in the same. And they said in the thing, like it was later speculated that he also committed that crime. And they were just kind of lumped in together, that they did kind of happen together. So interesting. Arthur Spring was 19 when he immigrated from Ireland to the United States, where he decided to settle in Philadelphia. And he met and married a 16-year-old girl who had also come from Ireland. People keep in mind, like that was normal.
Yes, that was the normal age.
Yes. The couple were married for 11 years before Arthur's wife died, which left Arthur to care for their son and two daughters. He tried and failed to start several businesses, including a grocery. He was also a salon keeper, and he did own his own confectionery for a while. The confectionery was his most successful out of all the business ventures that he started, but even though it was successful, it wasn't really making very much money, and he started to steal from others to make ends meet.
Uh-oh.
Well, this earned him a several years stay in prison, and he lost his store in the process. By 1852, Arthur was back in Philadelphia living in a boarding house with his son, Arthur Jr., who I'm going to just call him Jr. for the rest of it to like avoid confusion.
Okay.
Because he's going to come back and there's drama. Unfortunately, because of this, his daughters who were younger were actually sent to an orphanage in Washington, D.C.
Aww.
when he was sent to prison. And I put possibly ran by Eliza Hamilton.
Could have been.
I know. I was like, possibly, because she was still alive at this point.
I mean,
so interesting. Arthur rekindled the friendship of a woman named Honora Donovan. It's a lot of O's in that name, who he knew from Ireland. So they were childhood friends in Ireland. She also moved to the United States, lived in Philadelphia. They met back up. But at this time, she was known as Honora Shaw, and she had married a man who went off to California to be a part of the gold rush.
Mm-hmm. The second gold rush.
Yes, the second one. I mean, the more well-known one, but whatever. Her husband never returned, and he had been presumed dead by this point. Honora and Arthur's relationship wasn't quite clear. He claimed that the two were engaged, and they were just waiting for the news that her husband had officially been pronounced dead before they were married. Like he was just presumed, it wasn't really official yet. Others who knew Honora said that she actually didn't like him at all. And she just kind of felt sorry for Arthur and his son because like she knew Arthur from when they were kids. Honora was living in an apartment on 260 Federal Street with her sister Ellen and her sister's husband, Bartholomew Lynch. The apartment was a small portion of the home owned by Mr. and Miss John Carroll. Ellen had actually recently given birth to twins.
Ugh.
No, thank you, in 1853. And I mean, and Honora had moved into the apartment with Ellen and Bartholomew to help with the children. Arthur started to come by and tried to visit Honora, but both the Lynches and the Carrolls did not approve of him coming by to visit. So they would often like shoo him away. Well, on the night of March 10th of 1853, Honora and Ellen were alone in the house. Bartholomew was away to spend a few days in New York on business, and the Carrolls had gone out to a ball for the night. And the two must have had quite the evening together because they didn't arrive back home until 7:30 a.m. on March 11th. Just strolling back through the door at 7:30 a.m.
Oh.
I mean, you know. However, the high from their evening was quickly taken away once they walked into the front parlor and found the bodies of Honora Shaw and Ellen Lynch. The two were in a pool of blood, having been beaten and stabbed multiple times.
Ooh.
Based on the scene, it appeared that Honora had been attacked suddenly, and there weren't any signs of a struggle from her. The story was not the same for Ellen because she had cuts on her arms and hands, which made investigators believe that she had actually tried to fight off her attacker. On the coroner's report, it was noted that, Honora had been stabbed 17 times.
Ooh.
But her sister Ellen had been stabbed 41.
Oh.
Yeah. Once investigators took a deeper look into the crime scene, they found the sheath of a knife under one of the bodies and a heavy lead pipe in the same room that had the victim, in the same room as the victims that was covered in hair and blood.
Oh, yuck.
Aside from the pools of blood on the floor, there were blood stains on the door and walls that indicated the murderer was left-handed, and the stains also showed that the murderer had gone into Ellen and Bartholomew's room and broken into their trunk, which appeared to be opened with the killer's left hand. The tip of the knife used to open the trunk was found right near the lock. It was clear that the motive was likely robbery, and it was also clear that the victims knew their murderer because Ellen was already dressed in her night clothes, and it was very unlikely that she would have left her two babies upstairs to come down, like if she thought a stranger had just broken into the house.
Right.
You know, like that's not something you would really do. And you're not going to also go to the door and answer the door for someone in your night clothes at that time. Like that just wasn't really something.
And so nobody broke in the house.
No one broke in the house.
So it wasn't a forced entry at all.
Right. So for Honora to like, there not to be a sign of struggle for her, but there was one for Ellen, it makes you kind of think that maybe Ellen walked in when it happened or right after or something. Like it's unclear. Well, the first and obvious suspect was Arthur Spring. He had been a frequent visitor to the house. Oh, and he was left-handed. The authorities went to Arthur Spring's room at the boarding house. They found a shirt with bloodstains on it, and soon after, Arthur Spring and Arthur Spring Jr. were both arrested. The coroner's inquest occurred next, and Jr. was pretty quick to testify against his father. Jr. claimed that on the night of the murder, his father acted like he was going to go to bed early, but he actually left that night without anyone seeing him. Junior knew that he had left for the night because sometime between 10 and 11 that night, Junior was down near the back door. Like, I don't know what he was doing, but he was back there doing something. And he actually like ran into his father as his father was coming back in the door. So he was like, where have you been? Because you said you went to bed like 4 hours ago.
That up.
Exactly. Well, Junior said that his father's shirt was covered in blood and he was carrying his shoes to seemingly not make any noise as he was coming in. When Junior confronted his father, Arthur showed his son $70 in gold coins and told his son he robbed the Lynches and killed Honora and Ellen to do it.
Just straight up told him.
Just told him. He then told his son it was no sin to kill them.
Oh.
Arthur yelled at Junior during the coroner's inquest and called him a liar, and that it was actually Junior who killed the woman with a group of his friends. But much to Arthur's dismay, Junior's story was the one that everyone believed. The Philadelphia courthouse was packed on the morning of March 21st, and there was a pretty significant crowd that gathered out on 6th Street. Oh, and also all the way down the sides of the road from the jail to the courthouse.
Oh.
The crowd was so hostile that the authorities placed another man in the prison carriage that was driven down 6th Street in order to avoid a mob. And they actually took Arthur down a different route and brought him through the back door of the courthouse.
Wow.
During the trial, Junior's testimony reportedly took over 3 hours.
Oh, my goodness.
And even though it was the only evidence against Arthur, it was extremely believable. The defense objected to the testimony of Junior and said that it was impossible for one man to overpower 2 strong women. First of all, I am sure this is the first time in that court's history that they said that a woman was strong. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. Just saying. Because we haven't heard that one in all of the trials that we've covered so far. So very interesting. Like, it is so impossible that this weak man could overpower 2 strong women. I mean, like, yes, I am sure they were strong women. No doubt about that.
Right.
But that is not something an attorney would say. No. And with there being 2 weapons, there clearly had to be 2 killers. Well, we've seen that's not the case. In our last episode, there were 3 weapons. So
correct.
Yeah. They characterized Arthur Spring Jr.'s testimony against his father's as unnatural and self-serving. And they spoke against his character and his friends, who they were actually, his friends were a group called the Outlaws.
Oh, well, that's not a
And
good name for a
yeah,
group.
no, but they hung out on street corners and they like hung out in saloons and things like that.
But
But
wait, pause for just a second. His dad went to prison when
mhm,
he was a young kid
mhm,
for
mhm,
stealing, and his daughters had to go
to an
to
orphanage.
an
Mhm,
orphanage. So, I mean,
mhm.
I'm just saying, I mean, yes, love, you need to love your family. I'm not saying that, he needs to do something to get even with his dad or anything like that. I'm just saying his dad has already shown that he does not have the best of morals already. I'm just throwing that out there. So
Exactly.
I don't know that he would necessarily be self-serving for, testifying against his dad. I just think he'd be like, well, he's at it again.
Exactly. And like, yeah. So,
That's my opinion. Continue. I just wanted to
and then
just
like, we'll get to it, but
okay. I just wanted to go ahead
yeah,
and put that out there.
yeah. On the fourth day of the trial, the case was given to the jury, who deliberated for 3 hours before finding Arthur Springs Sr. guilty of murder in the first degree. Once the trial ended, Arthur's attorney received a letter saying that there had been some tampering in the jury selection. A man named Charles McQuillan had answered by the name of Bernard Core when Core was originally summoned for the jury. So he like said here when that was not him. Well, McQuillan continued the impersonation after being impaneled as a juror and never revealed his true identity. The attorneys filed a motion for a new trial, and the motion was granted. Well, even though the motion was granted, the second trial that took place on April 4th played out the same as the first one. And again, Arthur Spring was found guilty of first-degree murder.
I'm shocked.
Right? Much like we see today, some women in Philadelphia started to fancy Arthur after seeing the illustration of Arthur in the newspapers, and he started to receive quite a few love letters in
I don't
prison.
get it. I don't get it.
There's a podcast that I listened to, and they talked about the science, like why this happens. And so a lot of it, so there's two different theories out there that I can remember. And one of them is the like commonly referred to as the I can change him
Yeah.
theory. And the other is like the damsel in distress theory, where like he could save me in a sense, if that makes like it doesn't make sense,
No.
but it makes sense to them. Like,
Yeah.
like almost like a protector of sorts. It's very odd, but it happens a lot. Like
Crazy.
a
Crazy.
lot. I mean, like Manson had women writing to him
I
in
know.
jail. Like it's Richard Ramirez, who is absolutely, I'm sorry, like I don't typically say like things about people or their appearance, but one of the foulest looking humans in my life. All I can remember about his case is his teeth were absolutely terrible. And that is one of my things. So, um, you know, one of my many quirks. But yeah, so he started receiving a lot of letters in prison, but that adoration quickly wore off. And eventually, Arthur Spring was hanged in Moya Mensing prison on June 10th of 1853. So a pretty quick execution from the date of the murder. The murder was March 10th, and by June 10th, he had been executed. That's like really quick compared to what we've
Especially
heard.
to have two trials.
Yeah, especially for two trials. Exactly. So before he was hanged, he proclaimed his innocence again and shockingly also said that his son was innocent.
Well, then
Even
who
though
did it?
So Arthur's body was taken to the Philadelphia College of Medicine, where the body was given a post-mortem examination. His head was also examined by a phrenologist, which we've talked about a phrenologist before.
Mhm.
They're the ones that study like the shape of the skull and the features of the face to like determine whether that has something to do with psychology.
Mhm. Which is very fascinating.
Yes, it is. And the phrenologist wrote, quote, benevolence and other organs, which are indicators of a good disposition, were found to be very poorly developed, while selfishness and firmness were large and cautiousness was well developed. Secretiveness was large, and the animal organs, such as combativeness and destructiveness, were enormous. The base of the brain was very large. The forepart of the head was very small, and the back very large, indicating sensuality and cruelty. The professor styled the cranium of the deceased as a bulldog's head. Yikes. After examination, his body was placed in a coffin to be interred. But somehow along the way, the remains disappeared.
Why y'all got to do stuff to bodies?
When they opened the coffin, they only found a large log and some clothing. The coffin was interred anyway.
Oh my gosh. Forget the body. We'll just get the coffin in. I mean, y'all, why I got to do stuff to bodies? Y'all know my feelings on this.
Well, and somebody had to know what happened.
Right.
I mean, it's like, oops. And what you threw the log in there because you thought that, oh, this log will like mimic the weight of it. No. And you can't imagine that it's like a super nice coffin like we have now. So like, it's had to be like a cedar box or something like that. So you, like picking it up, you'd hear the log like roll to the other side.
Oh, stop it.
No. That's all I can like. And the ones that are today, like they're really plush and they're like, you know, all these things. So like maybe you wouldn't hear that, but you pick up the cedar box and you hear the log go to the other side.
Oh no.
So either way, Junior left Philadelphia and went to Washington, D.C. to be near the orphanage that his sisters were staying in. After he arrived, he actually took a job at the Department of Treasury as a messenger for the registrar's office.
Well, that's good.
And that is the Arthur Spring versus Arthur Spring Jr. and the murders of Honora Shaw and Ellen Lynch. So, a few things here. One, how dare you, sir?
Yeah.
Turn it on your son and say he did it. Like,
have you not put him through enough?
And why would he, like, there's no motive. I mean, I guess money is a motive in any terms, like that most people think of, but there's no motive other than money. And there was nothing to really say that Junior knew these two women.
Yeah.
Like Arthur knew them. So,
well, I mean, they probably, I mean, it's a small community and it was a small Irish community, I'm sure. And so they probably did know each other.
Yeah. I mean, they probably knew of each other, but it was just very weird. And then it's like, no, you tried to tell people they all are getting married and now she's dead.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a struggle. So clearly it seemed that she trusted the person.
Mm-hmm. She was probably just like, oh, well, here he is again. Bless his heart.
Yeah. Like,
feel so bad for him. And, you know.
And I mean, yes. And it's just such a odd thing. Just that, I mean, to think about that, just to turn it on your son and be like, he's a liar. He did it. Sir? No.
Yeah.
Don't turn this on your son. And like, were you turning it on your son because you thought he'd get like a lesser punishment by any means? And
or were you just trying to save yourself?
Right. And if he had done it, if his son had done it and he supposedly did it with this group of friends, and the group of friends was known because they had a nickname.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that group of friends somehow be seen near the home?
You know,
and wouldn't
there be evidence of more than one person? I mean, there would have been.
And I mean, there's also like the famous trope of like two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. So there's no way at least one person wouldn't have said that they did it. like
Mhm.
of a group of people. Like chances are somebody's
Mhm.
going to say something. And then when you're getting hanged, you're like, oh, my son didn't do it. Like, you think he's going to forgive you now?
Yeah, like thanks,
I,
Dad. I know.
yeah. Oh, gee, thanks. My conscience is clear.
But tell that to the two babies that are without a mother and grandmother now.
Exact. Aunt.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Mother
mother and aunt.
mother
Yeah.
and aunt now. And, the husband who's without a wife.
Hmm. So it's just, and for the Lynches and the Carrolls to kind of like try to get rid of Arthur anytime that he came
Yeah,
around.
like they knew he was bad news.
And it was also noted in one area that I read that Arthur knew Bartholomew and the Carrolls weren't going to be home.
Mm. Hmm.
So there'd be nobody there to like shoo him away.
Mm. Hmm.
And that he also knew that Bartholomew had left Ellen some money before he went out of town.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, and probably he knew that the game was over and he wasn't going to be able to marry her. And so he may as well just cut his losses.
yeah, I mean, which is, yeah. So
Frustrating.
anyway, that was an interesting one in the fact of like, oh no, my son did it. It's like, no, 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 sir. No, you can't just do
He
that.
don't believe you.
Can't do that.
At least they called the women strong in court.
You know, positives somewhere.
I mean, I tried. You know
Yes.
me, Pollyanna.
When I read that, I was like, what? Okay. I mean, I'm all for it, but interesting. Um, so
Oh, and by the way, if you make that reference to teenage girls, they don't get it.
I'm sure,
Broke my
honestly.
heart.
I'm
Broke my heart.
Well, we have a website where you can find any and all ONUC information you're looking for. It's onenationundercrime.com. We already talked to you guys about Patreon, so y'all know where to go to find that. Go become a part of the crowd. I mean,
The cool kids are doing it.
look, the cool kids are doing it. And I mean, not that we're saying we're a fan of peer pressure, but like,
We're not opposed to using it.
you know,
We're just putting it out there for
we're just
you
putting it
to
out
know
there.
about.
We're just throwing it out there. You can throw it back, but we'd prefer if you didn't.
Yep.
So you can also do something completely free and also gain our undying love. And that is to go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. 5 stars only. We've discussed this. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yes.
So there is that. We appreciate you guys for listening to this week's episode of One
Very
Nation
much.
Under Crime. We will see you here, same time,
Different crime.
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all.
Not
especially
even for your dad.
Yeah, especially if your dad tries to pin a murder on you.
Loser.
Goodbye.